Hi everyone! So for my project, I decided to talk about the Catholic Church's role in the Spanish Civil War and Franco's regime. And just to start off my project, I actually want to do an overview of what specifically I'm going to talk about in this presentation. So I'm going to start by talking about what Catalonia experienced as the greatest anti-religious outbreak that's actually known in all of modern European history. This is due for many reasons, one of them being that previously they made the Civil War a religious crusade, using a bunch of propaganda to enforce a Catholic institution. And on top of that, there were moves toward extremism and social revolution that actually lowered their powerful position in politics, making them an easy target for the Republicans and anarchists that attacked them in the future. However, when Franco came into power after the Civil War, the church actually rose to power and they became a part of the Francoist triumvirate of power along with the phalange and the military. And just to describe what the phalange is, it was a sole political party that Franco declared as a result of his victory in 1939. In addition, Franco gave a lot of power to the Catholic Church, so Spain actually went through a re-Christianization during this time period. And the church actually played an important role in the revival of Catalanism because they had so much power during this time period. They actually had the authority to speak the Catalan language in their religious practices. And then at the end, I'm just going to conclude the result of the church during the post-Franco era and how everything has been a cause and effect through this system right here. So in the election of 1936, the church sided with the conservative side and against anarchy, and the attempted military coup of July 1936 actually allowed the working class to radicalize and start a revolution. Because there was already popular anti-clericalism during this time, liberalism and anarchism only fed into that, and of course it didn't help that the church actually preached against liberalism and socialism. So many anarchists were against the church during this time, and the two quotes I have below just show how the people felt toward the institution at this time. They felt like they're being treated very unfairly by the institution, and so as a result, there was an assassination of over 2,000 priests and members of religious orders, as well as many attacks on the church. This time period became known as the Red Terror. So the Red Terror was actually a term used to define the various acts of violence during 1936 until the end of the Civil War. And so religious life became eradicated during this time period, and many who were practicing had to go into hiding. If you look on the picture on the left, that picture is known as the eradication of the Sacred Heart. And it's a pretty famous picture that's known during this time period of the Red Terror. The picture on the right shows the destruction of one of the Catholic churches. Over 6,000 members were executed, and a third of them took place solely in Catalonia. And 4,000 churches were destroyed as well, when 220 of them happened in only 2 days. Tombs and graveyards of saints, priests, and nuns were also ransacked, and then all of their material was displayed on the streets. So as you can see, their church went through a pretty hard time at this moment. They were being targeted easily by the Republicans and the anarchists, but don't think it's solely the church that was suffering. The Red Terror also targeted the nobility, the industrialists, and the conservative politicians. So it's very much people who had power before and caused inequality. So there were many reasons behind the Red Terror. Some believe that the corrupt institution has been like this for the past 500 years. And this because there's so much inequality, they left the poor to work in moral servitude. And people in Spain lived in a period of paranoia, censorship, and persecution because the church always wanted to be in control. They didn't necessarily trust its followers to always make the right decision. So as a result, they ruled in fear. They also ostracized Jews, Muslims, Protestants, and heretics of any kind. And heretics are people who spread heresies or any belief or doctrine that opposes what's normally thought of as right by the Christian institution. Because there was so much paranoia and fear during this time, people actually started to believe these rumors that happened in the convents. Some believed that they actually mollified pregnant women alive. And to prevent any more heresies, the church actually underwent the Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition was a time when the church really went through the population to, I guess in a way, cleanse them of what they believed was the right way to behave. As a result, they executed 30,000 people and burned 17,000. and an additional 300,000 were penanced or tortured in a different type of way. And as a result, the psychological scars have been left for many years later, which is probably why the Red Terror happened in the first place. So if you take a look at the two pictures, one on the left and one in the middle, those are examples of what happened during the Spanish Inquisition, and then the picture on the right is the emblem that signifies the Spanish Inquisition. However, during Franco's rule, the church was actually brought back up to the top. His rule was to represent a restoration of the bourgeoisie. So everyone who was attacked in the Red Terror was actually flipped, and it was more of the lower class that suffered. So the church was on a wave of national Catholicism, and Catholicism replaced Catalanism. Franco did not support Catalanism because he very much viewed it as a separatist movement and not as united for the whole country. And the Catholic Church remained silent on the crimes during this time. It was mostly the lower class and the workers that suffered. In February 1941, the Bishop of Vic emphasized the need to re-Christianize the Spanish people who had been poisoned by Marxist utopias and return them to faith. And so during this time, only 3% actually considered themselves Catholic, which greatly bothered the church. And so the quote here describes the sentiments of the church. It says, "Lead the people 50 years without priests, and they will worship the beast." So I just want to talk about how Franco's rule kind of reminded me of the rule that took place during the Spanish Inquisition. The rule was very strict, and they both wanted to censor and try to predict everything that would happen. During this time, a lot of leaders in the church actually blamed porn, cinema, film, and dance for corrupting the youth. So right now they're hoping to re-Christianize all of Spain. So in 1947, 113 churches had been built, and another 13 were under construction. So Franco actually helped the church regain its power. In 1952, the biannual celebration of World Catholicism actually took place in Barcelona. And because this celebration took place on Spanish soil, that just shows how there was such a great mutual relationship between the Catholic institution and the Franco regime. They became more powerful with each other. And the Concordat of 1953 was actually signed under the Franco regime. And this institutionalized the position and privileges of the church, and it cemented its right to avoid prior censorship of its own works. So that let the church deem what is moral and what is immoral. In addition, to continue the re-Christianization, an excursionista movement, which totaled about 23,000 people, took place by 1960, and it also had a Boy Scout membership of almost 5,000. And so this Catholic-led construction of Catalan civil society was led by Monsignor Antoni Batlle. And so I have pictures here of the Concordante 1953. And this was important because it actually ended the isolation that Spain put itself in after World War II, and this was under the pontification of Pope Pius XII. So the beginning of Catalanism actually took place through the church, although the church was on Franco's side. In a lot of religious practices, Catalan traditions still took place. So for example, in 1948, in Montserrat, they spoke the homily in the Catalan language, and in 1949, there was a celebration of Abbot Oliba. That was a big religious festival that was spoken with the Catalan language, and Abbot Oliba is actually a saint. He's the one who founded the monastery of Santa Maria de Montserrat. And during this time period, about 10,000 women were actually named Morenata in honor of Montserrat and the Catalan movement that took place there. In April 27, 1947, the Black Madonna in Montserrat was actually the first Catalan cultural event during the time. And although this was a very big move for Catalanism, its main focus actually was religious. It really focused on fighting the enemies, whether they be inside or outside of Spain. Another big figure that took place during this Catalan movement was Josep Torres i Bages, and he's the founding father of Catalan Catholicism. I have this quote about him right here, and it says, "Much of what Vic is today and much of the universality achieved by bombs in the decades to follow is due to the illustrious and greatly loved figure of Torres i Bages," and that's what an observer in 1940s said. He actually led the clerical involvement, and many other Catholic groups were very impressed by him. He actually had his own group named after himself. And then lastly, another big part of the beginning of Catalanism was how the Catalan church actually had to appeal to the people of Catalonia in order to retain its followers. During this time, there wasn't just secular people that lived in Catalonia, it was a lot of anti-religious people. So in order for the church to keep its loyal followers, the few loyal followers that it has, it knew that it had to appeal to what they really like in their Catalan tradition. So that was another incentive for them to induce Catalanism into their structure. So Franco's attempts at eradicating the Catalan culture actually just became reduced to preventing political manifestations during this time period. And so at the end of the Franco era, the rebirth of Christianization did not work. By the 1950s, Catalan culture and manifestations were increasingly suffused with the Catalan Catholicism, revealing how cultural forms had become dependent on religious patronage. Although that is true, I have to say that Catalanism did remain mainly secular. However, anti-clerical traditions did end due to the church's close relationship with Catalan opposition during the 1960s. And as News Horizon, which is a Catalan magazine, has said, progressive Catholics deserve our support. And so the Franco regime restored the Catholic Church to a position of power, but the belligerent nature of the church would ensure that a break in the regime would occur. I feel like that describes the nature of the country pretty well. Through this presentation, I was actually able to discover how intertwined the Catholic institution and the Franco regime, as well as the Civil War, are. As I mentioned earlier, it's a perfect example of cause and effect to see how one institution can cause another and how it affects its people in general.